The clock on the wall showed 9:47 p.m., and Maya's feet were killing her. She had been on her feet for nearly 12 hours straight, running between tables at the Meridian restaurant. Her black shoes squeaked against the polished marble floor She hurried from the kitchen to table 14 with another order of the chef's special salmon. This was her second job of the day. Earlier, she had worked at a small cafe downtown, serving coffee and sandwiches to office workers during their lunch breaks. Every dollar mattered now. Every tip counted. Her younger brother Danny was scheduled for another surgery next month, and the medical bills were piling up faster than she could pay them. Maya paused for a moment near the restaurant's entrance, catching her breath. The Meridian was nothing like the small cafe where she worked mornings. Everything here sparkled with expensive taste. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over tables covered in white linen. The walls were decorated, with paintings that probably cost more than she made in a year. But what always caught her attention was the piano. It sat in the corner of the main dining room like a sleeping giant. The black grand piano was beautiful, its surface so polished she could see her reflection in it. Maya had walked past it hundreds of times during her shifts, always stealing glances when she thought no one was looking. She knew exactly what kind of piano it was. A Steinway Model D, the same kind she used to dream about playing at Carnegie Hall. Before everything changed, before Danny got sick, before she had to drop out of music school and take whatever job she could find. Maya shook her head and got back to work. Dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. The restaurant was busy tonight, filled with well-dressed people eating expensive food and drinking wine that cost more than her weekly rent. Maya moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, taking orders, refilling water glasses, and clearing plates. She had learned to make herself almost invisible, the way good waitresses do in places like this. At 10:15, the hostess approached her with a worried look. "Maya, we have a VIP coming in. Table 7, Mr. Harrison Blake." Maya knew that name. Everyone in the city did. Harrison Blake was one of those tech billionaires you read about in magazines. He had started some computer company in his garage 20 years ago and turned it into an empire worth billions. His picture was always in the business section of the newspaper, usually wearing an expensive suit and looking serious. "He's having a business dinner," the hostess continued. "Very important. Make sure everything is perfect." Maya nodded and checked. Table 7. It was the best table in the restaurant, positioned near the piano with a perfect view of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She made sure the silverware was spotless and the water glasses were filled to the exact right level. At 10:30, Harrison Blake walked in. He was younger than Maya had expected, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a navy blue suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. But there was something in his expression that made her nervous. He looked angry about something, the kind of controlled anger that rich people are good at hiding. Maya approached his table with her best professional smile. "Good evening, Mr. Blake. Welcome to the Meridian. Can I start you with something to drink while you wait for your guests?" Blake barely looked at her. "Scotch, the 18-year-old, and water, no ice." "Of course. I'll have that right out for you." Maya hurried to the bar and placed the order. The bartender, an older man named Roberto who had worked at the Meridian for 15 years, raised an eyebrow when he heard the order. "Blake's here again," he said, pouring the expensive scotch. "Third time this month. Always in a mood about something. Rich people problems, I guess." Maya carried the drinks back to table 7, walking carefully across the polished floor. Blake was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones about some business deal that wasn't going well. Maya set the scotch down quietly, not wanting to interrupt. As she reached for the water glass, Blake gestured sharply with his hand, apparently frustrated with whoever he was talking to. His elbow bumped into Maya's arm just as she was setting down the water. Time seemed to slow down. The glass flew out of her hand and crashed onto the table, sending water cascading across the white tablecloth. But worse than that, much worse, was what else was on the table. Blake had spread out several documents, papers that looked official and important. The water hit them like a small tsunami, soaking through the pages instantly. Maya watched in horror as the ink began to run, the typed words becoming blurry and unreadable. Blake ended his phone call immediately and stared at the mess in disbelief. Oh no, I'm so sorry, Maya said, grabbing napkins from a nearby table and trying to dab at the papers. But it was too late. Whatever had been written on those documents was ruined. Blake's face went through several shades of emotion very quickly. Surprise, then anger, then something that looked almost dangerous. He carefully picked up one of the soaked papers and held it up to the light as if hoping the words might magically reappear. Do you have any idea what these were? His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more frightening than if he had yelled. Maya's heart was pounding. I'm so sorry, sir. I can pay for copying costs, or these were the only copies of a contract for a deal I've been working on for 6 months. Blake set the ruined paper down very carefully. A deal worth approximately $10 million. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. $10 million. She couldn't even imagine that much money. Her brother's surgery was going to cost $30,000, and she had been working 2 jobs just to save up for that. The other party was supposed to sign tonight, Blake continued, his eyes never leaving her face. They were coming here specifically to finalize this deal. And now, he gestured at the soggy mess on the table. Maya felt like she might throw up. Sir, there has to be something we can do. Can't you print new copies? Blake's smile was not a nice one. The documents were handwritten notes from a meeting last week, specific terms that took months to negotiate, details that aren't written down anywhere else. Maya realized that other diners were starting to stare. The restaurant was getting quieter as people sensed the tension at table 7. She could see her manager hovering near the kitchen door, probably trying to decide whether to come over. I could lose my job for this, Maya whispered. You could lose more than that, Blake said softly. Do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea who I am? Of course she knew who he was, everyone did. Harrison Blake was the kind of man who could ruin someone's life with a phone call, the kind of man who had lawyers on speed dial and enough money to make problems disappear, or to create them. Maya stood there with soggy napkins in her hands, watching her life fall apart in real time. She thought about Danny, waiting at home, for news about when his surgery would be scheduled. She thought about the bills piling up on her small kitchen table. She thought about how she was going to explain to her manager that she had just destroyed a $10 million business deal. Blake was still staring at her, and Maya realized he was waiting for something. An explanation, maybe. Or just watching, to see what she would do next. The piano in the corner seemed to be watching too, its black surface reflecting the restaurant lights like a dark mirror. Maya's hands were shaking as she tried to clean up the mess. The water had spread across the entire table, dripping onto the expensive carpet below. The ruined papers looked like something a child might create with watercolors. All the important words now just smudged black lines. Blake pulled out his phone and took pictures of the damage. Each click of the camera made Maya's stomach drop. Further, she knew he was building evidence, probably planning to sue her or get her fired. Maybe both. Sir, please, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I messed up badly, but there has to be something we can work out. I have insurance through the restaurant, maybe that could… Insurance? Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think insurance covers lost business opportunities? You think there's a policy that pays out when someone destroys months of negotiations? Maya's manager finally worked up the courage to approach the table. David Chen had been running the Meridian for 8 years, and Maya had never seen him look so nervous. His usual calm confidence was completely gone. Mr. Blake, I'm terribly sorry about this incident, David said, wringing his hands. We'll of course cover any immediate costs, and we'd like to offer you a complimentary meal for the inconvenience. Blake looked at David like he had just suggested they solve world hunger with breadsticks. A complimentary meal? My business partners are going to walk through that door in 20 minutes expecting to sign a $10 million deal. What exactly do you suggest I tell them? David's face went pale. Maya could practically see him calculating how much trouble The restaurant would be in if Blake decided to make this public. Bad reviews from powerful people could destroy places like the Meridian. Perhaps we could arrange a private dining room for your next meeting, David offered weakly. And of course, Maya will be disciplined appropriately for this accident. Disciplined? Blake stood up from his chair. He was taller than Maya had realized, and when he looked down at her, she felt like a child being scolded by a teacher. This wasn't just an accident. This was carelessness. Pure, expensive carelessness. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying would only make this worse. Mr. Blake, I know you probably think I'm just some clumsy waitress, but I really need this job. My brother is sick and I'm working 2 jobs to pay for his medical bills. If I lose this job... She couldn't finish the sentence. If she lost this job, Danny's surgery would have to be postponed again. Maybe indefinitely. Blake studied her face for a long moment. Maya couldn't tell what he was thinking, but something in his expression shifted slightly. Not softer, exactly, but more calculating. Your brother, he said slowly. What's wrong with him? Maya wasn't sure why he was asking, but she answered anyway. He has a heart condition. He needs surgery, but we have to pay a big part of it up front. The insurance only covers some of it. How much do you owe? $30,000. The number felt huge when she said it out loud. Blake nodded like that made sense to him. To someone like him, $30,000 was probably what he spent on lunch. And how much do you make here? Maya glanced at David, who was listening to every word. She didn't really want to discuss her finances in front of her boss, but she was in no position to refuse to answer. About $800 a week, if I work. 6 shifts, she said quietly. So this job is important to you? Yes, sir. Very important. Blake walked away from the table and stood looking out the window at the city lights. Maya and David waited in uncomfortable silence. Other diners were definitely watching now, though they were trying to pretend they weren't. After what felt like forever, Blake turned around. When he spoke, his voice was different. Still cold, but with something else underneath it. Something that might have been amusement. I have a proposition for you, he said. Maya's heart jumped. A proposition sounded better than a lawsuit, at least. My business partners are going to arrive soon. Important people who I've been trying to impress for months. This deal falling through makes me look bad. It makes me look like someone who can't handle simple business meetings. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure where this was going. So here's what's going to happen, Blake continued. You're going to help me save face. You're going to entertain my guests while I figure out how to salvage this situation. Entertain them? Maya looked confused. I don't understand. Do you want me to serve them? Take their orders? Blake's smile was sharp. No, I want you to play piano for them. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She actually took a step backward. What? That piano over there, Blake said, pointing to the corner. I've seen you looking at it every time you walk past. You obviously know something about music or you wouldn't stare at it like that. Maya's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming. Out. How had he noticed her looking at the piano? She thought she had been careful about that. I can't, she finally managed to say. I'm a waitress. I don't know how to play piano. Blake's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I can tell when someone's lying, and you're terrible at it. You know that piano. The question is how well. David was looking back and forth between them like he was watching a tennis match. Maya could tell he had no idea what was happening, but he was smart enough to stay quiet. Mr. Blake, Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. Even if I could play, which I'm not saying I can, I'm working, I have other tables to serve. Not anymore, Blake said simply. David here is going to reassign your tables to other staff. Aren't you, David? David nodded so fast Maya was worried he might hurt his neck. Of course, whatever you need, Mr. Blake. Maya felt trapped. She looked around the restaurant, hoping someone might help her, but everyone was carefully avoiding eye contact. This was between her and Blake, and everyone knew it. I don't understand why you want me to play piano, she said. Can't you just call off the meeting, reschedule it? Blake's expression darkened. You don't understand how business works. These people flew in from 3 different cities specifically for tonight. Canceling would signal weakness. It would tell them I can't handle problems. He stepped closer to Maya, and she could smell his expensive cologne. But if I can turn this disaster into something interesting, something memorable, then maybe the evening isn't a complete loss. Maybe my guests go home thinking Harrison Blake is the kind of man who can turn any situation to his advantage. Maya was starting to understand, and she didn't like it. You want to use me to impress them. I want you to help me clean up the mess you made, Blake corrected. Think of it as paying your debt. The way he said it made Maya's skin crawl. This wasn't a request, this was a demand wrapped up in polite words. And if I refuse? She asked, though she was pretty sure she already knew the answer. Blake's smile was cold as winter. Then I make some phone calls. I have friends in this city, Maya. Important friends. Restaurant owners, hotel managers, employment agencies. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the service industry will know that you can't be trusted around important documents, that you're clumsy and unreliable. The threat hung in the air between them like smoke. Maya felt sick. She knew he could do it. Men like Blake had that kind of power. You're blackmailing me, she said quietly. I'm offering you a chance to make this right, Blake replied. Play piano for my guests, help me salvage this evening, and we'll call it even. Your job is safe, your brother gets his surgery, and you go back to your normal life. Maya looked at the piano in the corner. She hadn't played in 3 years, not since she left music school. Her fingers probably wouldn't even remember where to go, but she didn't have a choice. Maya stared at the piano like it was a dangerous animal. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The last time she had played in front of people was at her music school recital 3 years ago. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Blake checked his expensive watch. They'll be here in 15 minutes, he said. I suggest you use that time to get ready. Get ready for what exactly? Maya asked. What do you want me to play? I don't care, Blake said with a shrug. Something impressive. Something that will make them forget about the business we were supposed to conduct tonight and focus on. What an interesting evening this turned out to be. Maya felt like she was drowning. Mr. Blake, I haven't played in years. My hands probably don't even remember how anymore. What if I mess up? What if I can't do it? Blake's expression didn't change. Then you better hope you remember quickly. David was still standing nearby, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Other staff members were pretending to work while obviously listening to every word. Maya realized that everyone in the restaurant was going to watch her either succeed or fail spectacularly. She walked slowly toward the piano, her legs feeling like they were made of lead. The closer she got, the more real this became. She was really going to have to do this. The piano bench was the exact right height. Maya sat down and lifted the cover, revealing the black and white keys she used to know so well. They looked the same as they always had, but somehow foreign at the same time. She pressed middle C gently. The note rang out clear and true, filling the space around her. A few diners turned to look, probably wondering why the waitress was suddenly at the piano. Maya tried a simple scale. Her fingers stumbled a little at first, but muscle memory started to kick in. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The notes flowed more smoothly than she had expected. Better, Blake said from behind her. Keep going. Maya tried a few chords. Her left hand felt rusty, but the movements were still there, buried under 3 years of not playing. She had spent so many hours at pianos like this one, practicing, until her fingers ached and her back was sore from hunching over the keys. She remembered why she had stopped. The memory hit her like a punch to the stomach. It was a Tuesday afternoon in her senior year of music school. She had been practicing for her final recital when her phone rang. Danny's voice on the other end, scared and small, telling her that he was in the hospital again, that the doctors said he needed surgery right away. Maya had left school that day and never went back. There hadn't been time for music anymore. Danny needed her more than Carnegie Hall did. Something wrong? Blake asked. Maya realized she had stopped playing. No, I'm fine, she lied. She couldn't tell him about Danny, about why she had given up music. Blake was already using her brother's illness against her. She didn't need to give him more ammunition. The restaurant's front door opened, and Maya's stomach dropped to her shoes. 3 people walked in, all dressed in expensive business clothes. 2 men and 1 woman, all looking like the kind of people who made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Blake straightened his tie and walked over to greet them. Maya watched from the piano bench as he shook hands and exchanged the kind of polite conversation that rich people seem to do automatically. "Harrison, so good to see you," said one of the men, an older guy with silver hair and a smile that probably cost a fortune in dental work. "Richard, always a pleasure," Blake replied smoothly. "And Patricia, thank you for flying in from Seattle. I know how busy you are." The woman, Patricia, looked around the restaurant approvingly. "This place is lovely, much more intimate than those stuffy conference rooms we usually meet in." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Blake was already setting them up, making them think this was all planned, making them think the piano performance was part of some elaborate evening he had arranged. "Actually," Blake said, glancing over at Maya, "I have a little surprise for tonight. Something to make this meeting more memorable than our usual business dinners." All 3 guests followed his gaze to the piano. Maya felt their eyes on her like spotlights. She wanted to run, to hide, to be anywhere but sitting at this piano in front of these important strangers. "Oh, how wonderful," Patricia said, clapping, her hands together. "Live music. What a thoughtful touch, Harrison." Blake's smile was the smile of a man who always got what he wanted. "Our pianist tonight is very special. She's going to play something I think you'll find quite moving." Maya's mouth went dry. Our pianist. Like she belonged to him. Like she was just another piece of expensive furniture in his perfect evening. The 3 guests settled into their chairs. At Blake's table, which the busboy had quickly cleaned and reset with fresh linens, Maya noticed that someone had moved Blake's ruined papers away, probably thrown them in the trash where they belonged. Blake walked back over to the piano and leaned down close to Maya's ear. To anyone watching, it probably looked like he was making a polite request, but his voice was hard when he spoke. "Don't embarrass me," he said quietly. "These people represent $100 million in potential business. If you mess this up, if you make me look foolish, I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Maya's hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to make them stop. "What should I tell them? About who I am, I mean?" Blake thought for a moment. "Don't tell them anything. Let them think whatever they want to think. The mystery will make it more interesting." He walked back to his table, leaving Maya alone with the piano and her racing heartbeat. She could hear him talking to his guests, something about how he had discovered this amazing talent and wanted to share it with them. Maya looked out at the restaurant. More people had noticed that something was happening. Other diners were turning in their chairs to get a better view. The staff had slowed down their work, finding excuses to stay nearby and watch. She thought about Danny, probably asleep at home right now, not knowing that his big sister was about to either save his surgery or lose her job trying. She thought about all the bills on her kitchen table, all the late notices and payment plans and desperate phone calls to insurance companies. She thought about the music. For 3 years, Maya had pushed down every memory of playing piano. She had convinced herself that music was a luxury she couldn't afford, a dream that belonged to someone else's life. But sitting here now, with her hands on the keys, she remembered why she had loved it so much. Music had been the one place where everything made sense, where her feelings could turn into something beautiful instead of just painful, where she could take all the sadness and worry and fear and transform it into something that mattered. Blake was watching her from his table, his eyes cold and expectant. His guests were smiling politely, waiting for their entertainment to begin. The entire restaurant was holding its breath. Maya closed her eyes and let her fingers find the keys. She started with something simple, a piece by Chopin that she used to play when she was nervous. But as the first notes filled the air, something unexpected happened. The music started to change. What began as a classical piece slowly became something else, something that came from deep inside her chest, where she had been keeping all her worry about Danny, all her exhaustion from working 2 jobs, all her grief for the dreams she had given up. Her fingers found melodies she didn't remember learning, harmonies that seemed to create themselves. The piano responded like it had been waiting for her, like it knew exactly what she needed to say. Maya forgot about Blake. She forgot about his threats and his guests and his ruined business deal. She forgot about the restaurant and the watching faces and her aching feet. For the first time in 3 years, Maya remembered who she used to be. The music flowed from Maya's fingers like water breaking through a dam. What started as a simple melody began to grow and change, becoming something entirely her own. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was telling a story. The first part of her song was gentle, almost like a lullaby. It spoke of childhood dreams and quiet hopes, of a little girl who used to sit at an old upright piano in her grandmother's house and imagine herself on stage at Carnegie Hall. The melody danced through major keys, light and full of possibility. Maya's eyes were still closed, but she could feel the restaurant around her growing quieter. Conversations that had been humming in the background slowly faded away. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to pause. Then the music shifted. Her left hand found deeper, more serious chords. The melody in her right hand became more complex, more urgent. This part of the song was about growing up, about learning, that dreams cost money and that sometimes love means giving up what you want most. Maya thought about the day she left music school. She remembered packing her books and sheet music into boxes, knowing she might never open them again. She remembered the scholarship letter that came 2 weeks later, offering her a full ride to finish her degree. The letter she threw away without even showing to Danny. Her fingers pressed harder into the keys and the music became almost angry. Not angry at Danny, never at him. Angry at the world that made children get sick. Angry at the system that put price tags on healing. Angry at herself for sometimes wondering what would have happened if she had chosen differently. Someone in the restaurant gasped softly. Maya didn't know who, but she could feel that the sound came from a place of recognition. Someone else who understood what it meant to sacrifice dreams for love. The angry part of the song gradually softened into something more complex. This was the part about accepting hard choices, about finding strength in places you didn't know it existed, about discovering that sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is give up something beautiful for someone you love more. Maya's hands moved across the keys with increasing confidence. 3 years of silence fell away like old clothes. Her fingers remembered everything they had ever learned, every hour of practice, every piece she had ever mastered. But more than that, they seemed to know things they had never learned, melodies that came from someplace deeper than technique. She could hear her own breathing, quick and shallow, but her hands never faltered. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. This was what she had been missing. This was the part of herself she had locked away to keep it safe. The song moved into a new section, one that sounded like hope fighting its way through darkness. The melody climbed higher, became more insistent. This was about Danny, about his courage in the face of surgery after surgery, about his smile when she came home exhausted from her double shifts, about the way he never complained, never asked why this had happened to him. Maya thought about all the nights she had sat beside Danny's hospital bed, watching machines beep and flash around him. She had hummed to him sometimes when the nurses weren't looking. Simple songs, children's songs, anything to help him sleep. She realized now that those moments had been music too, just a different kind. The restaurant was completely silent now, except for her playing. Maya could sense people leaning forward in their chairs, drawn into the story her hands were telling. She had no idea how long she had been playing. Time had stopped meaning anything. Blake's business guests sat frozen at their table. Patricia had her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide. Richard was staring at the piano like he had never seen one before. The third guest, a younger man Maya hadn't really noticed before, had tears running down his cheeks. Blake himself looked stunned. This was clearly not what he had expected when he forced Maya to play. He had wanted entertainment, a distraction from his failed business deal. Instead, he was witnessing something raw and real and completely beyond his control. Other diners had turned their chairs to face the piano. A woman at table 12 was crying openly. An elderly man near the window was nodding slowly, like he understood every note. Even the restaurant staff had stopped pretending to work and were standing still, listening. Maya's song began to build toward something bigger. Her left hand found a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat, steady and strong. Her right hand wove melodies around it that spoke of resilience, of hope that refused to die no matter how hard life tried to kill it. This was the part about choosing to keep going. About getting up every morning and working double shifts, not because you had to, but because someone you loved needed you to. About finding joy in small moments even when everything else was falling apart. The music swelled, filling every corner of the restaurant. Maya felt like she was flying, like her soul had finally found its voice again after years of silence. Her right hands moved faster now, creating harmonies that seemed impossible. Melodies that layered on top of each other like conversations between different parts of her heart. She played about the morning Danny would wake up from successful surgery, healthy and whole. She played about the day she might return to music school, if that ever became possible. She played about dreams deferred but not abandoned. About love that makes every sacrifice worthwhile. A new person had entered the restaurant without Maya noticing. The hostess had stopped trying to seat them, too caught up in the performance to do her job. But this person, an older woman with silver hair, stood near the entrance with her mouth open in amazement. Maya's song began to slow, but not in a way that felt like ending. Instead, it felt like coming home. The melodies became gentler again, but they carried the strength of everything that had come before. This was the part about finding peace with your choices, about discovering that sometimes the life you didn't plan is more beautiful than the one you thought you wanted. Her hands found the simple melody she had started with, but it sounded completely different now. It carried the weight of everything she had played, every emotion she had shared. The same notes, but transformed by the journey they had taken. Maya played the final chord and let it ring out in the silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The sound hung in the air like a prayer, like a promise, like a truth too beautiful to disturb. Then slowly one person began to clap. It was the elderly man near the window. His applause was gentle but certain, and it seemed to wake the rest of the restaurant from a dream. One by one, others joined in. Then more. Then everyone. The applause wasn't polite restaurant clapping. It was the kind of appreciation that comes from witnessing something real, something that touches a place in your chest you forgot existed. People were standing up, some of them still crying, all of them somehow changed by what they had just experienced. Maya opened her eyes and looked around in wonder. She had forgotten there were other people in the room. For the time she had been playing, there had been only her and the music and the story she needed to tell. Blake was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. His business guests looked like they had just witnessed a miracle. Patricia was still clapping, tears streaming down her face. Richard was shaking his head in amazement. The younger man was on his feet, applauding like his life depended on it. But it was the woman by the entrance who caught Maya's attention. The silver-haired stranger was walking toward the piano with purpose, her eyes bright with something that looked like recognition. Maya had no idea that her life was about to change, forever. The applause slowly faded, but Maya could still feel the energy in the room. Her hands were trembling as she lifted them from the piano keys. She felt empty and full at the same time, like she had just poured her entire soul into those few minutes of music. The silver-haired woman was still walking toward her, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of knowing exactly who you are. She was dressed simply but elegantly, in a way that spoke of quiet wealth rather than flashy display. Maya stood up from the piano bench, suddenly aware that she was still wearing her waitress uniform. Her black shoes and simple white shirt seemed ridiculous after what had just happened. She felt like she should be wearing something more fitting for someone who had just played like that. "Excuse me," the woman said, reaching the piano. Her voice was warm but carried an authority that made everyone nearby pay attention. "I'm Catherine Williams." The name meant nothing to Maya, but she noticed that several people in the restaurant reacted to it. Blake's business partner, Patricia, actually took a step forward, her eyes wide with recognition. "I'm Maya," she said, still not sure what was happening. "I'm sorry if the music was too loud. I know this is a restaurant, not a concert hall." Catherine smiled and her whole face lit up. "My dear, that was extraordinary. I haven't heard playing like that in years. Where did you study?" Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I went to the Riverside Music Academy for 3 years. But I didn't finish. I had family things to take care of." "Riverside has an excellent program," Catherine said thoughtfully. "Who was your piano teacher there?" "Professor Martinez," Maya answered, wondering why this woman was asking so many questions. "She was amazing. I learned so much from her." Catherine's eyebrows shot up. "Elena Martinez, she taught you?" Maya nodded, confused by the reaction. "Do you know her?" "Know her?" Catherine laughed. "She was my roommate in college. We studied together at Juilliard 40 years ago. Elena always had the best students." Maya's heart stopped. Juilliard. This woman had studied at Juilliard, the most famous music school in the world, and she was talking about Professor Martinez like they were old friends. "I'm sorry," Maya said, still trying to process this information. "Are you a musician too?" Catherine's smile became even warmer. "I'm the artistic director of the Metropolitan Symphony Orchestra." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. The Metropolitan Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. She had dreamed of playing with them when she was still in school, back when she thought such dreams were possible. Maya became aware that the entire restaurant was listening to their conversation. Blake had stood up from his table and was watching, with an expression somewhere between amazement and calculation. His business guests looked like they were witnessing something historic. "I was supposed to meet a friend for dinner tonight," Catherine continued, "but she had to cancel at the last minute. I was walking past when I heard the most beautiful music coming from inside. I simply had to come in and find out who was playing." Maya felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. 20 minutes ago, she had been a waitress facing the loss of her job. Now the artistic director of the Metropolitan Symphony was standing in front of her, talking about her playing like it mattered. "Miss Maya," Catherine said gently, "would you mind if I asked you a few questions about your musical background?" "Of course," Maya managed to say, "but I should probably get back to work. My manager is going to wonder where I am." David, who had been hovering nearby the entire time, quickly stepped forward. "Please take all the time you need," he said to Maya. To Catherine, he added, "It's an honor to have you in our restaurant, Ms. Williams." Catherine led Maya to a quiet corner table, away from the other diners who were still stealing glances at them. Maya's legs felt weak as she sat down. Nothing about this night made sense anymore. "Tell me about why you left school," Catherine said softly. "Elena mentioned you once, you know. She said you were one of the most naturally gifted students she'd ever taught. She was heartbroken when you didn't return for your senior year." Maya's throat tightened. Professor Martinez had talked about her? Had cared enough to be heartbroken? "My little brother got sick," Maya explained. "He needed surgery and someone had to work to pay for it. Our parents died when Danny was small, so it's just been me and him for the last 5 years." Catherine listened without interrupting, her face full of compassion. When Maya finished explaining about the medical bills and the double jobs and the impossible choice between music and family, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "That must have been incredibly difficult," she said finally. "But what you just played tonight tells me that you never really stopped being a musician. You just found a different way to carry your music." Maya felt tears starting again. "I miss it so much. Playing tonight, it felt like coming home to a part of myself I thought was gone." Catherine reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "My dear, talent like yours doesn't just disappear. It waits. Sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, but it waits." From across the restaurant, Blake was watching their conversation with growing interest. Maya could see him talking quietly with his business partners, all of them glancing over at her table repeatedly. "Maya," Catherine said, "I want to make you an offer. The Metropolitan Symphony is always looking for exceptional musicians. We have a program for adult students who want to complete their musical education while working with our orchestra." Maya's heart started beating so fast she thought it might explode. "What kind of program?" "You would finish your degree through our partnership with the conservatory. In exchange, you would work with our orchestra as an apprentice. There's a small salary, enough to live on, and full medical benefits." Medical benefits. Maya thought. About Danny's upcoming surgery, about all the bills that kept her awake at night. "But I'm not good enough for something like that," Maya protested. "I haven't played seriously in 3 years. I'm rusty. I'm out of practice. You're exactly what music is supposed to be," Catherine interrupted gently. "Tonight you took a room full of strangers and made them feel something real. You reminded them why music matters. That's not something you can teach, Maya. That's something you either have or you don't." Blake appeared at their table, his business partners trailing behind him. Maya tensed, remembering how this whole evening had started with his threats and manipulation. "Ms. Williams," Blake said formally, "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Harrison Blake." Catherine shook his hand politely but coolly. "Mr. Blake, I understand you're responsible for tonight's performance?" Blake's smile was careful. "In a way, yes. Maya works here at the restaurant. I simply asked her to share her talents with my guests." Maya stared at him in disbelief. Asked her? He had blackmailed her, threatened her job, used her brother's illness against her. And now he was standing there acting like he had done her a favor. But then she looked at Catherine, at the opportunity that had just fallen into her lap like a miracle. And she realized something unexpected. Blake's cruelty had led to the most important night of her life. His attempt to humiliate her had instead revealed her gift to exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Sometimes, Maya thought, the worst things people do to you end up becoming the best things that ever happened to you. "Well," Catherine said, standing up from the table, "regardless of how it came about, I'm grateful I was here to witness it." She handed Maya a business card. "Call me tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss." Maya looked down at the card in her trembling hands. It was real. This was really happening. Blake and his guests left soon after, their business deal forgotten in favor of something much more interesting to talk about. The restaurant slowly returned to normal, though Maya noticed that people kept looking at the piano differently now. As Maya walked home that night, she thought about calling Danny to tell him the news. But first, she wanted to savor this feeling just a little longer. The feeling that dreams don't always die when you think they do. Sometimes they just wait for the right moment to come back to life.